was tired. Sometimes I wonder just how things happen this way. And I'm just reminiscing of that one cold night we once met. You pick me up every morning, and I'd just be through with the club. I never thought that a girl could love a man this much. I am overwhelmed, and baby, I just can't thank you enough. And I'm wondering, oh, sweet darling, now tell me, what did I do to deserve you? What did I do, babe? What did I say to make your angel eyes turn my way? If only I had the world, I'd give it all to you, babe. Give it all. Now I'm about to leave for the road. I'll take you with me in my heart, and I really pray the Lord my soul to keep. And maybe just one request, keep me in your need.
Today, welcome to Inner Wellness. Inner Wellness is a 8-part series hosted by GRC's Pono program to center mental health and wellness from a native Hawaiian Pacific Islander lens. You can join us every Thursday from 12 to 1:30 p.m. as we explore our inner wellness. Special shout out to our sponsors and the people who have made this series possible: GRC Pono program, Elevate Healing, New Hope Counseling, and the King County Pacific Islander Task Force. Also want to give thanks to the Voice of South Pacific, a local island radio station focused on broadcasting the latest in the Pacifica, who have graciously agreed to stream our series for folks to tune in. Akandran. Finally, I want to thank our sister Anapisi institutions who are collaborating with us on this project. So shout out to North Seattle College, Shoreline Community College, and South Seattle College. My apologies for any others that I have missed. My name is Leslie Finn, she, her, and I am the Pono project coach at GRC, and I have the honor of serving as today's co-host for today's session. Passing it off to our other co-hosts to introduce themselves and open today's session.
Thank you so much, Leslie. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so good to be here. Despite the cyclone or whatever that was called, you are here today. So we are truly grateful and so thankful that you get to join us this afternoon and having this amazing conversation with Scarlett and I. And so if you haven't attended like any of our previous community conversations, my name is Sala Afalava. I am a licensed mental health therapist here in Washington. And so I see clients through my own private practice. And then also I do a lot of work with Scarlett and partnering with different community nonprofits in the area just so that we can continue to get the information out to our community regarding mental health and everything mental health. And so we want to be able to like bring down that barrier of being able to like pay for to be able to pay to be able to see a therapist. But instead of doing that, you can just click on that link and you are here with us and you get to tune in on this so many different topics regarding mental health that we will be discussing, just like the one that we are talking about today, which is boundaries. That is It's one of my what I always say this with all of the conversations, but truly it is like one of my favorite community conversation. What's your boundary? And so Scarlett does an amazing job in being because she is a boundaries coach. So that's why she does an amazing job. But she does an amazing job in being able to introduce boundary and what that is, and then be able to introduce also that cultural perspective when it comes to boundaries, right? So be looking forward to being able to hear her and be able to like hear all the amazing information that she's going to be sharing with us today. But aside from that, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to let us know in the chat. If you have any questions, we always ask that make sure it's regarding the conversation topic for today. Because a lot of times we find ourselves in the community conversations, and next you know someone is asking a question about something that they experienced like 2 3 years ago, and we're like, okay, let's bring it back. Let's bring it back just so that we can continue to honor everyone's time. But that's a little bit about myself and a little bit about what we will be getting into today. I'm going to give it over to Scarlett to be able to introduce herself and then get us started on today's community conversation.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sala. So appreciate you. So grateful I get to do these community conversations with you. And, if you follow our social medias and you're like, wait, they're doing that again. Yeah, we everywhere. That's the goal. We all over, because we definitely speak to different communities about these topics that we have been, blessed and fortunate to share with our community. And again, big shout out to our sponsors, especially he's not here today, but he's the driving force, Tausili Kalepo, who puts us out there, and we appreciate that. But before I go any further, my name is Scarlett Ekaroma. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and boundaries coach. Been in this field for over a decade. Absolutely have been find this field such a joy because I get to now do things like this with you all. Being a boundaries coach is absolutely a joy that I have, because just like Sala said, when we ended up talking about one of the topics that we wanted to teach our community, when Sala and I got together, if before season 1 of classes happened, we said we got to teach them about boundaries. Like we just have to, but introduce it in a way that it can be received well, so that we can, because we always include the cultural piece in this. So again, just like Sala said, if you have any questions, any comments, please don't direct message me in the Zoom chat, because I will not be able to see it. So please send it directly to Sala, or just put it in the overall chat. If you are on Facebook or any social media platform watching this live, welcome, welcome, welcome. And then please put your questions or whatever you would like to share in the chat, because all chats will be monitored. So I will go ahead and get myself set up. Oh, and welcome to the GR Center. Thank you, students, for being here. And again, if you have questions for us, let us know. In this, Sala or Leslie will be sharing the event summary, and you will find our contact information in there. And you don't have to take any notes, because it's all in the event summary, because we want y'all just to participate and listen. Because if you haven't been here before, we love engagement. We love to engage with you all. And so this is our second to last one. Our next one, I believe, last one is 2 weeks from now, because next week is Thanksgiving, and enjoy the food. So I'm going to go ahead and get myself set up, and then Sala, you let me know if all is well, please.
Okay. And as Scarlett is getting that going for us, boundaries is like one of those topics that, if introduced by, I think someone that doesn't have sort of that cultural lens, it's almost like offensive. It's almost offensive. And so sometimes when people hear boundaries being taught or being, for us having a conversation around it, it's almost like they're a little bit hesitant or they're not sure. What's unique about Scarlett's boundary conversation is that it really does introduce sort of that cultural lens that's missing from, anyone else can talk about boundaries, but, for a person of color, for, someone with so many intricate cultural values and things like that. Like, when you bring boundary in such a way that, you're able to take those things into consideration, it's a whole nother conversation. And so, hopefully, if you're tuning in today and you're just kind of like, oh my gosh, like a boundary, like that's like, what is that? Like this, we Samoans, we don't got boundaries. We all up in everybody's business. We all family, we all up in everybody's business. So, but it is so important. And like Scarlett mentioned, when we are compiling all of these conversations together, these are really like sort of like recurring themes that we would see in therapy, that we would see among AA community members, that we were seeing in our own individual private practices. Okay. And so we're seeing sort of like these common themes, and we're like, okay, you know what? Let's put some community conversations together about these common themes that are coming up. And boundaries is a huge one. Boundaries is a huge one. So I'm really excited to be able to get started on this conversation. So like Scarlett mentioned earlier, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, complaints, just message me. Don't message her. Okay. Message me, let me know. And then I'll share that and facilitate that within a conversation.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks for that, Sala. So just one last housekeeping rule. So this is something that we had to recently mention. So for all who are in attendance and anyone rewatching this class, this presentation and all its contents are protected by copyright law. Please do not teach or reuse any of our content without our written permission. You may submit a written request in the information located in the event summary. We had to start saying that because Shala and I started seeing our content being used in other presentations without our permission. And we've also had to, unfortunately, we've had to tell someone to not teach our class because they tried to, and it did not go well when that person tried to teach that class. And so this was a person who was not a therapist who tried to do that. So that's just the last housekeeping rules. So wanted to share a little bit on my background story, how I actually got into becoming a boundaries coach. And, it kind of just fell into my lap because like Sala said, what we noticed was a lot of clients came in, they had never even heard of the word boundary before, especially our older generation. And what we noticed was that there was a lack of knowledge and a lack of skill of how to set healthy boundaries. And so what we'll talk about here today is like how boundaries are not isolating, how we find a balance in boundaries. So what I had to do when becoming a boundaries coach, I said, how did I learn how to set healthy boundaries? Because growing up, that's just something I just didn't learn to do. And I actually didn't learn about the word boundaries till I went to grad school to become a therapist. So I was 28, 29 years old at that time. What I recognized was when learning about boundaries, I didn't even know I had them. And then when I started to recognize that I had boundaries, I didn't realize how often that they were violated. And what I recognized when my boundaries were violated, I would become physically ill. So I would either get nauseous, I would get headaches, body aches. I would go into like these crying spells. And internally, I was frustrated a lot. And then what ended up happening was I was always on edge, which is anxiety. So it wasn't until 2010, I was on my way to grad school, had this huge wake up moment, and I was on this life discovery about how can I live life more healthily and discover what actually are my boundaries. And this is 2010. So we're talking about 14 years ago that I'm learning this. Okay. And so I was discovering what are my boundaries, how to honor my boundaries, and how to find that balance in boundaries where I didn't isolate. And so this is that cultural context, because we always feel like if we have to have boundaries, it's isolating, and it's not. I would say probably the biggest lesson I learned when I started setting healthy boundaries is that it didn't mean I was a bad person if I was setting healthy boundaries, and it didn't mean that I was less lovable, and whoever I set them with, that I did not love them less either. Because a lot of times we set boundaries, it's like, oh, there's like we feel like we're a bad person for setting that with them, but there's a different way we have to introduce it to our community. So I have an opening question for you all. Either put it in the chat or unmute yourself. And Sal, if you would like to add, please do so. So the opening question is, when you think or hear of the word boundary, what ideas, thoughts, or feelings come up for you? And I'll definitely share mine as well.
Well, I think like one of the things that I always recall from my own experience with boundaries is it was like non-existent.
Yeah.
It was I'm an island girl through and through, grew up in Samoa, and then left as a teenager, and so forth. And so like growing up in Samoa, like it's you're around family,
Mhm.
and so there's this sense of community. There's this sense of togetherness, always, always the togetherness,
Absolutely.
you know. And
Mhm.
so there was never like, one of those things where it's like, oh, like there was just I just don't remember it being like I have to set like something, like I have to set
Yeah.
this thing between me and, you know, my mom or something like that. It just felt like it was just, everybody was in on everybody's business or
Oh,
something. But it was almost like it was non-existent in my experience early in childhood. But then
mhm.
growing up, I started having a lot of the issues that you were talking about, Scarlett, like, just having, all of these like expectations, cultural
Yeah.
expectations, family expectations, things like that. And so then that easily got to the point, like everything that you were talking about, like where it starts to cause, sort of stresses and issues for me as well. And so it wasn't until like having to work through that and realize the importance of like, well, how do I take care of myself? Because
Absolutely.
self wasn't even in the picture when it came to that. And I think like with boundaries, like you have to consider self.
Yeah.
Like with boundary, you have to consider self. And so for someone that grows up in a collectivistic community,
Mhm.
self is it's outward. We think of others first before we think of self.
Yeah.
So but those are just some of my, sort of experiences thinking about like
Mhm.
boundaries growing up.
For sure. And I think that's the part with self, especially grow up in a collectivistic community. It's that if you actually thought about self, it was highly considered taboo and selfish. It's
Hmm.
just like, no, we have to do what is best for the family and the system first. And so I think those are just things that we just grow up with and we don't learn any differently. And I think that's again why we're having this conversation because we see our community coming to our offices saying, I can't do this anymore. I need help. And they don't verbally, like, they don't verbatim say it like that. But then
Hmm.
we talk about, okay, let's talk about how we can still honor culture and honor you. And they're like, wait,
Yeah. Yeah.
what? You can do that? I'm like, oh, yeah, you can.
They're like, you can do both.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, you can. So it's a very interesting concept that we introduce to our community because they just feel like it has to be one or the other. And where
Hmm.
you and I are like, no, it can be both.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it can work really well.
Hmm.
And then we'll get into more of that. So just wanted to open the space. So the question was, when you think or hear the word boundary, what ideas, thoughts, or feelings come up for you? And then Sal, let me know if anything's in the chat as well. And just a reminder, if you have questions directly for me, please send it directly to Sala because I won't get to it.
Me
Good?
got something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Non-existent when younger, but now that I'm older, guilty is the word that comes to mind. Oh, yes, we
Oh,
will
yes.
get into guilt
Talk about guilt.
later on in a few slides from now.
Exactly.
And then Lindsay says, boundaries make me think of being scared, scared to tell someone no. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Oh,
Yeah.
yes, we will definitely get into that for
For
sure.
sure.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think when I think of before becoming a therapist, when I didn't know what boundary, I honestly I was like, well, I don't know what is that. So of course, boundary in my mind, because I grew up, I was an athlete, I just thought about a court, that because those were court boundaries. I didn't think anything like, wait, you're supposed to have boundaries in your personal life? Like, how does that even happen? Like, what is that? And so what ended up happening before that, I was confused a lot, like quite a bit. Because I'm like, because there was this whole concept that was being introduced to me, and I'm like, wait, what is that? Like, you can actually do that? And so, but of course, Sala had to do it to where it fit our community best, not what the Western concepts of it are. And we will definitely get into that when we get to the culture piece. So this is the agenda for today. So we're going to watch a short film. And we're talking about all things healthy boundaries, the what, the why, culture, and why is it hard. And then, of course, we're going to walk away. We're going to give you all some tips that you all can start using with immediacy, that you do not have to wait to use it. These are literally tangible things or intangible things that you can start using now. So, Sala, go ahead.
Yes, another comment in the chat. Everything you and Scarlett spoke to about the tensions between family responsibility and boundaries resonated with me. As a firstborn Chinese American daughter, those concepts don't have to be mutually exclusive. Yeah. But
Yeah.
oftentimes they are perceived as such with elders. And I had to have a lot of conversations. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
for
Yes,
sure.
yes, yes. Yep.
Thanks for
Mm-hmm.
sharing that. Yeah, I always have to give, our I always will always say in every class that anytime we talk about elders is that we have to practice giving them grace because they only did what they knew. And so, but the great thing about it is that they are teachable. That you can teach them. Sal and I have had the honor of working with our elderlies, and we talk about these same topics with them. It's so new to them. And one of the things that I will always hold dear to me was when one of them said to us, "Thank you for not forgetting about us and teaching us. We just didn't know." And so that's a real honor when it comes because our elderly just didn't know. So, but we're going to watch this short video on boundaries. And I thought this is a great short video on, and just did a great job on summarizing what boundaries are. And then we'll have a short conversation about that as well. And Sala, let me know if we're good.
Today we're talking about personal boundaries, the invisible lines that define the edges of who we are. Personal boundaries help us navigate in the world. Knowing and managing where we end and the other person begins is essential to living a satisfying and healthy life. But when our boundaries are crossed, it can make us feel stressed, confused, and anxious. And as with most things to do with our brains, boundaries aren't one size fits all. We each set our own boundaries to allow some people to come close or to keep others at a distance. People can violate your boundaries in a number of ways. When someone does this, it's a big red flag. For example, if someone makes you feel like you don't have the right to your own individual thoughts and feelings, big red flag. Have you ever been told that you're responsible for someone else's bad behavior, violence, or abuse? A huge red flag. Or if someone always expects you to return texts or calls immediately, that's another red flag. Learning to manage our own boundaries is a necessary step in learning to love ourselves and others. When you set a boundary and the people in your life respect it, that's a huge sign that this is the type of person you want in your life. Like when someone asks your permission and doesn't force you into an uncomfortable situation, or when someone allows you to disagree with them without retaliation, or when you're allowed to say no to anything, including sex, drugs, parties, even requests for your time. When you're able to identify red and green flags, it allows you to strategically share your life with those around you. By strategic sharing, we mean that in every situation, you decide who has access to your body, mind, and personal information. With time and practice, you'll get better at being able to identify the red and green flags that define your personal boundaries. Through that process, you'll gain more trust in yourself and will be able to strategically share more of your life with the people around you that you know you can trust.
Right. Any comments? Any questions about this video? And Sal, if you wanted to add anything, let me know. All right. Go ahead, Sal.
He's like, yes, please, everyone chime in because I'm telling you, Scarlett and I will just keep going off. Okay. So this is our jam. We love doing this. We love doing this work. We love engaging in these conversations. So please don't let us conversate by ourselves because we will talk forever. But truly, I think like one of the things that always stands out to me with this video is when it says like boundary is knowing where we end and another person begins, you know. So knowing where we end and then and then like, you know, another person begins something there. And I think like for me, I always think about or use the example of like a fence that goes around, you know, like your yard. You have a fence that is there to like, you know, kind of it marks sort of what is your property, where your property ends, and then where maybe your neighbor's property begins, right? So then I think of boundaries in that way, that goes all around. Like, so you have a fence that goes all around your backyard. And so that kind of lets people know, okay, this is definitely all of Sala's property right here. But the thing is, with the fence, if you think about it in that example of a fence, my backyard fence, like, it has a gate, right? It has like a door where I can just open that door and go into the backyard. I can like walk in the front yard and then open that door and go into the backyard, right? So I say that when I think about boundaries, it's kind of like that fence where it's permeable. Like, we can change it. We can open that door and let whoever it is that we want in. I'm like, if I'm having a party in the backyard, I'm like, okay, yes, go ahead, neighbor, welcome to my backyard party. If I see a neighbor that maybe I'm beefing with for something, I'm like, I'm not too sure. I'm gonna go ahead and close my close my fence on this neighbor. I swear I'm not beefing with the neighbor. But if I of course like see somebody that I don't want to come to my backyard party, I'm gonna go ahead and close that door. So I think of boundaries in that way, to where it makes sense to me in my mind, where it's permeable. Like, we can allow what we want to allow to come into our lives, and then we can close the door, or stop things from like coming into our own spaces. So I just really enjoyed watching this video. So I'm gonna just leave some time. Like I said, we will go on and on and on about this, but
Thanks for
okay.
sharing, Sala, for sure. Anybody else want to add anything before I do?
I think so we have some in the chat. So says, it seems interesting to me that you could set a boundary and someone just be okay with it.
Yeah,
Yes,
it
yes, yes.
is.
So
Well,
that being a sign of a healthy relationship. Yes, yes, yes. That being
yeah,
a sign of a healthy relationship is something unfamiliar to me. Oh, yes.
yeah,
I think it's important to highlight that our boundaries are not static, nor are they universal between all
yep,
people. I liked how the video touched on that. My
yep,
boundary with one person may look different than my boundary with another person, and that's okay. Yes.
yeah.
Whereas I used to feel guilt and feel that it was not okay. Come on, the chat is
Mm.
fire.
That's for the chat. I'm here for y'all. So yeah, that's wonderful, because that's what the thing everybody thinks. Not everybody. What I have come across is that what fits for one person, works for one person, should work for me. Not true. As the video says, there is no one size fits all. You have to define what works for you. What I loved in there, and basically when they talked about red flags, is like, gotta know what your red flags are. What are your red flags? Because my red flags are not someone else's red flags. The great thing that I also loved what it talked about boundaries, is you're learning to self-love. You're learning to love yourself by teaching people how you want to be treated. The great thing about boundaries is that they can, like Sal said, they can be adjusted, and it does take time and practice. It does take time and practice. And then I'll definitely share of some boundaries, like I've helped with clients before, about like how we can set a small obtainable boundary that they can handle. Because a lot of times people are like, I gotta do this big thing. No, no, no. You do it small. I always say I'd rather it be small than none. And then I always get concerned when you want to do big steps, because there's a bigger probability of you falling back very quickly, which doesn't help. Any other comments or questions?
Today we're
Good.
Good to go.
Awesome. So healthy boundaries, what are they? So this is from the author Anne Catherine. From her book is Boundaries Where You End and I Begin, just like the video said. Healthy boundaries protect without isolating, contain without imprisoning, and preserve identity while permitting external connections. So let's break this down a little bit, because I know that's can be quite a bit. So healthy boundaries help protect without isolating. Means it helps protect you internally, externally, and keeps you connected to yourself and others. Contain without imprisoning, meaning you get to have options, you get to make choices for your life, and you get to give yourself permission to do so. They're preserving identity while permitting external connections, meaning you do not have to give up who you are to make another person comfortable and also still be connected with them. Questions, comments about that?
So when I hear I swear, y'all gotta guys say something because I will go. Okay.
You go ahead, sis.
Contain without imprisoning, right? So I think that goes back into what I was talking about with the example with the fence. You know, you have your property line like contained, right? So everyone that I've invited into my, my property, my backyard party that's going on, they are contained back there in my area. And then I also have the choice or an option. If I didn't invite anybody, I'm going to go ahead and close the gate. I'm going to close the gate, So I think like that, I think that's just like this visual that I have when I see that definition of like contain boundaries is when you contain without imprisoning. So I'm not, having like a brick wall in my backyard and keep it like as soon as you come in, like that's it, you can't leave, and it's a brick wall, you can't break it down, but it's a fence where I have a door and I can open if anybody wants to leave. If even at the party, if there's someone that acts up, like, okay, go ahead and bye Felicia, I'm gonna go ahead and close that door. So we can contain, and therefore I think like when we do that, like we definitely do like in a way maintain preserve a bit of who we are, right, as individuals, without being able to, like, I think like a lot of time I when I work with clients and they've given so much when they don't have those boundaries for themselves. They give themselves so much, whether it's to community, to the work that they do, to the passion that they do, to whatever it is that they're doing. They are giving so much of themselves that they are at the point where they don't even recognize who they are. Right?
Absolutely.
They don't even recognize who they are. They feel lost, they feel depleted. They are just kind of running on fumes. And where it's like I think someone had mentioned it before, like not being able to say no. Not being able to say no, like, oh, but it's sort of that, like I don't want to say no, I don't want to disappoint them. And or if I say no, I'm gonna feel so guilty about it. So and that's why it's like with this definition of boundaries, like it really does preserve who you are, like your identity. And that you're not just kind of like pieces of yourself you're giving away every single time. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and read some things in in the
Okay, go
chat.
ahead.
Let me see. I love how it first recognizes the boundaries are not meant to be isolating. They aren't created at the expense of community. Yes.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, and to share a story real quickly, like when Sala was saying, you just kind of keep giving, keep giving. And so that was part of my epiphany in 2010, where I recognized that I was constantly giving and constantly being this strong superwoman that I thought I had to be. And it wasn't until like I got physically ill, like I was so nauseous, and then it was like this epiphany. I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting sick because of like what's happened. Like I keep giving to my family. And I can't say it's their fault. Like now I know it's not their fault. I just didn't have boundaries. I just didn't know how to say no. So then I had to be responsible. I'm like, so that's when I was like, I got to do this differently. I can't keep doing it like this because I'm giving it. Because a lot of times when we keep giving, we're actually, we're not taking care of ourselves. We're giving out a depletion. We're giving from a depleting cup, is what I'd say. And so what I always talk about with clients is, we always hear, we've heard or somewhere somehow like, my cup overfloweth. And so one of the things I always say is like, it's your duty to keep your cup filled. The overflow is for everybody else. So if you don't keep your cup filled, it's like, what do we have to do to keep your cup filled? And that's part of, you got to have boundaries. You have to have boundaries. And again, we'll talk more and more about how to balance it out, not isolate. Because that's not the point of boundaries. Boundaries is not to isolate. Questions
We
and
have a
comments.
question from Una.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just want to you to clarify is so really boundaries is like when I'm setting my own, more like my own boundaries and not having control of other people to follow my boundaries. So they either accept it or not. I'm just,
Yeah.
it's what you're saying is clarifying it to me that it's good to set boundaries, but
Yep.
I'm not in control of other people. I'm setting it for myself only.
Absolutely. Here's the
Okay,
thing that
clear.
I'll mention.
Thank you.
So for example, when you set a boundary with someone, however they react, that's information for you. You get to decide what you want to do. You get to decide again, however somebody reacts to a boundary you set, that is information for you. And you get to decide what you want to do with the information you have been given. And so, for example, that doesn't mean that you have to stop talking to them. It's like, all right, so I notice every time I do this and I set this boundary, they violate it in this way. What do I want to do? Do I want to say something? Do I want to not talk to them about this certain topic? Do I want to just remove myself from there? Do I want to have a conversation with them? Like, hey, can we talk about what just happened? So again, however somebody reacts to your boundary, that is information for you, and you have to decide what you want. You get to decide what you want to do. That's that part of talking about like the containing without imprisoning. Like you think about your options, you think about your choices and what you want to do. That's that permission part you give yourself.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good question. Great question. Any other questions, comments? Are we good?
We're good.
Good. Awesome. All right. So why are they important? Because they just are. Let me just put it out there. Okay. So let me ask you this question before we go on the importance of boundaries. What are your thoughts and feelings when your boundaries are violated? And I have, you can see Sala and I got stories. Okay. So the question is, what are your thoughts and feelings when your boundaries are violated? You can share it in the chat or unmute yourself. And if you're on Facebook, you can put it in the chat there as well. And so I'll start us off because, like I said, I got stories. So, as you know, we are a community of stories. Like we love stories. When I think about my, when I think about when my boundaries were violated, like I know it's probably hard to believe, but I was a hothead. Okay. Like I would get heated and I would immediately go into flight or fight. Know that flight or fight survivalistic mode. I'd be ready to not just fight physically, but fight with my words, because that was what I was really good at. I would fight with my words. And so, but I didn't realize, because I thought whatever that person was doing was like they were just attacking me, but I didn't realize. Now I know. I was like, oh, I probably should have said, hey, don't do that. That bothers me. Because I would just take it and take it and take it and just say nothing. Because I was a person who used to suffer in silence. I know that's probably hard to believe now, but I was until I learned how to healthfully state my boundaries. And I had to be like, okay, no, this is unacceptable. This is not okay. So I had to learn how to say it well so that it could be received well. Now, it didn't happen like that all the time, but it was like we talked about in that video. It was time and practice that I had to learn how to practice what was going on, or what someone was doing and how to say it to where that person could receive what I was saying. And like I said, however they reacted to it, I was just like, all right, so it's probably not somebody I want to like move forward with, or somebody I probably like limit time with. So again, you think about all those actions. So that's what happened, or that's what would used to happen when my thoughts and feelings are violated. So even with my child, when he violates my boundary, I say to him, I said, so that's unacceptable. I need you to think about how you're going to do that differently moving forward. And he's like, oh, okay. And then we talk about what it is that was done. And then that part, my child has to identify the solution moving forward. So the question was, again, what are your thoughts and feelings when your boundaries are violated? I know I ain't the only one. Okay.
We for sure ain't the only one.
Exactly.
So we have another comment in the chat. Says, when my boundaries are crossed, I can physically feel myself shrinking. Ugh, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And
Yeah.
I'll add on to that too. When I think like depending on who is violating my boundaries. I think, if that also
It does
makes
depend,
sense
yeah.
sometimes,
Mhm.
right? I feel like sometimes for me myself, I tolerate a lot of things. I tolerate a lot of things. And a lot of things doesn't get to me as much.
Mhm.
However, like there are certain people, like mainly my family, early on, to where it's like, I think early on, I reflect back now, and I realized like I was one of those. I was like, for like not being able to say no,
Mhm.
and then my response to it, or how I would feel every time I did say no, I
Mhm.
would have so much guilt. I would
Yeah.
have so much guilt. And I think a lot of that, might be tied to, my cultural upbringing as well.
Mhm.
Like this whole, like, take care of the family, take care of this, like just a lot of that. I think there's a cultural piece in that, to where, um, if I'm not taking care of my family, there's this huge sense of guilt,
Yeah.
that I remember. So that's what I've definitely gotten so much better with boundaries these days, but it was a work in progress. It was definitely a work in progress. And just to also reiterate, sharing from that was sharing from Voice of the South Pacific, like, yeah, sharing your boundaries. Boundaries is something that you're doing for yourself and
Mhm.
not for others. I think, and that's really a really difficult concept to grasp, especially if we're coming from a collectivistic society.
Absolutely.
When we're thinking of like, you're setting this for me, not for them. And you're like, wait, what? We're all about them. We're all about community. We're all about everyone else but us. You're telling me I need to like focus on me. So it's a really difficult concept to be able to grasp, coming from our communities,
Yeah.
but it is possible.
It is. And
Mhm.
and part of this conversation is because the unfortunate thing is I have experienced in my family when someone didn't have boundaries and is no longer here on this earth.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
that's the unfortunate, and would be hospitalized. And
Yeah.
even when even I introduce, well, do you think that you cannot do this? And in the hospital bed, I had a family member say, "Well, no, I have to because the family's depending on me. I got to do
Right.
this," and not
Mhm.
even recognizing that they're the one who actually needs the help.
Yeah.
This is why it's important to talk about boundaries and how to find that balance. Because
Mhm.
again, Sala and I are not proponents of getting rid of our culture. No, we want to add
Mm-mm.
on to it. We want to add on to it, add these new concepts so that it can be part of our culture. So we hope like generations from now that it's like, oh yeah, I remember like we learned about boundaries and it keeps getting passed on and passed on because that's what we desire for our community.
Mhm. I'll read a, comment in a chat. Fixers
Ooh,
are often the ones that end up suffering. My
former fixer.
family, aren't we all? That my family is used to me fixing things. So
Mhm.
and placing boundaries cause large reactions from my family. Yep.
Yep.
As I've grown older, I've learned to stop needing to fix.
Good,
Yes.
good job.
Amen to that. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Of course. Like, so like in addition to that, like Scarlett talked a little bit about this earlier, like again, the reason why we're bringing this conversation is because these are recurring themes. Like we would literally see
Yeah.
people sitting across from us in therapy from our communities, and the stress that they are going through, that's affecting them in their work, in their health, their physical health,
Yep.
emotional, mental health, like in so many different areas of their life. And we're like, oh, like, like they'll just kind of give. And we're like, well, I wonder what would happen if like you were able to, say no to that one, and it was such a one of those concepts that it just really
Yeah.
difficult for them to grasp. So
Yeah. And that and to speak on that, we actually teach our clients how to say no in a different way. For example, like what I have taught clients, I said, tell me what you feel comfortable doing. And they'll say it. And then I said, okay, so here's how we can frame that. Can we say to whoever the family member is, I'm unable to do that, but here's what I can offer. And they're like, oh, wait, you can do that. I'm like, yeah, that's a different way of saying no. So, any other questions, comments before I press forward?
yes. this is reminding me. Do you mind sharing an example of a client you had that where you had to sort of coach them through
Oh,
that
oh yeah.
and
So
their response and how that turned out for them?
absolutely. I had a couple of years ago, a Samoan male client was tirelessly giving to the Fat Lava Lavas, which is our community event. So and it was financially putting a burden on him, like taking out like loans, like just in deep debt, just so he can satisfy that cultural piece part of him. So what I ended up doing with him, I said, well, tell me what your talents are. Like, what are like, what are you good at? He's like, oh, well, I'm like really good at painting. Ended up showing me some of his paintings. I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah. I said, well, can we offer that instead of money? And he was like, I never thought about that. I said, yeah, that's a different way of saying no. So he ended up, we found the words that we came up with something that he could say to his family, how he can offer it. Cause there's a certain way you have to speak to when those things happen. And he offered it and they were like, oh yeah, like let's do that. So he doesn't give money. I don't know. Hopefully he's doing well now, but he doesn't give money anymore. He At that time he was just doing the paintings for every like weddings, birthday parties, funerals. He was the person now who was doing the paintings. So that was a boundary that worked for him. I still want to contribute, but I just can't keep doing it financially. But here's what I can contribute. So that is one of the ways that we were able to find that balance and boundaries to where he still felt like the part of the community. Also, he felt like an individual, so where he could still honor himself. Because he loved doing it. Like he just loved painting. And it was magnificent paintings that he did. And hopefully he's still doing that. And I have no doubt that he still is. So that's an example of that.
Yeah. Thanks, Scarlett. Yeah,
Nope.
so like I think if you think about it, if you I don't know if anybody's been to like a Samoan funeral or wedding or anything, any kind of like those type of occasions, they're very extravagant when it comes to like those huge banners. They go all out. I mean, the little pins, buttons that they have, like I mean, like
Sweaters.
the whole thing, the sweaters, they go all out, right? And those things cost so much money. And so when you're sharing that about your client, I'm like, with his painting and with his talent and what he's able to offer is far more. Like it probably would have saved his family so much money just for him doing it. But it's just interesting to hear that and for him to be able to like work with you on how he's able to present that as an option. It didn't even occur to him that it could be an
Yeah.
option. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with I love about what we do is that we help clients think about options, not what's always been what they have been taught to do. And that's the importance of again, like Sala talked in her first community conversation about what is therapy. It is important to find the right therapist. And even if it's not a Samoan therapist, or Pacific Island therapist or an Asian therapist, if you're Asian or whatever BIPOC, is to find somebody who actually understands and won't exclude your culture when it comes to the therapy piece. So here's why it's important. It creates a healthy relationship with yourself and then creates emotional safe space. Notice I said I didn't say anybody else. You have to know what it's like to feel safe within you. When you create an intentional relationship with yourself, it helps create intentionality with others. We often, and this is why I said you have to create this for yourself, because often and too frequently, I see our people suffer in silence because we don't know what a healthy boundary is. So again, healthy boundaries is a protective factor. It helps create a healthy relationship with you and helps protect you. Next is you understand, share, and identify your likes, needs, and wants. And then when you're able to do that, you're able to share with others and how you would like to be treated and what's acceptable. So for example, just even between Sala and I don't know what Sala's boundary is unless she tells me. I don't know if I've hurt her feelings unless she's telling me, like if I violated a boundary. So we have to take the time to figure out what it is that we need. Because when you get to know you better, then it is easier to share what's important to you. So again, no, I said in our last community conversation, no one here is a mind reader. It's tiring. As a person who used to try to do it, I failed miserably. So again, this is for you. All of this is to increase, all of these community conversations is for you to increase your self-awareness. This is not about anybody else. This is about you and how you can continue to improve you. And then lastly is practice. You practice using your voice to share those likes, needs, and wants. You have to use your voice to state your needs. It is essential because I or no one else knows what is a violation to you unless you state it. Again, no one here is a mind reader. If I don't share, if I was hurt by something and I don't share it, then it's just like, that's on me. I need to share it because I can't expect somebody to stop something unless I tell them to stop. So again, it's to create a healthy relationship with yourself, you understanding you, and then you practice and then you practice sharing your voice. Questions, comments? Good?
I'll add a little bit.
Please do.
When he mentioned about, people won't know that your boundary is there unless you communicate that to
Mhm.
people, not by like, how like we do, where it's like, the eyebrows, like,
Oh yeah.
like the nonverbal
Nonverbal.
communication. No, that's not going to work. Okay. Because it can be misinterpreted differently, but it has to be communicated. It has to be verbally communicated to someone. And an example I always think of is, in our families, it's like whenever, my siblings come over or something like that, they'll just come through. They'll just come in the door. They're just like, they know where the key, the extra key is and stuff. And so they'll just come in the door, right? And so it just gets to the point where, it's be like, okay, like we're having a nice family dinner and my siblings are just pulling up and coming through, my front door, where it's like, okay, I think this is starting to be an issue. But my siblings don't know that because I've never communicated that to them, right?
Mhm.
Never communicated that to them. So it's like, hey, I think when the next time you all come over, can you like text first or call first or at the very least ring the doorbell? but like, let's not just like come through, right? Because like, I might be entertaining guests or something, and y'all just rolling up in here. You know how our families do. So I think that's like, for me, it's like such a funny example to kind of like think of, if that boundary isn't there, if my siblings don't know that, like, hey, I would really much preferred if you text me before coming over or call me before coming over, or the very least ring my doorbell before you bust through my door. That if they don't know that, if I don't communicate that to them, they're not gonna know. They're just, because like we're very close knit.
Mhm.
So they're gonna think like, oh, it's okay, it's bro's house, it's sis house, sure, let me
Mhm.
just, go in. But it's like, no, communicate that to them clearly.
Mhm.
So just wanted to share that.
No, and thanks for sharing that, Sal. So another to add on to that, like I've told family, I'm like, don't tell me last minute because I'm not coming. You got to tell me in advance. They're like, oh yeah. So now my family knows they have to tell me in advance, and they won't.
Hmm.
Otherwise, they'll be like, if it's whatever the same day, I always just tell me after. Like, tell me how it went after because I'm not coming. So
Yep.
you have to know for you because what is a problem on someone's end is not necessarily a problem on your end.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, coming from the chat, I've also learned as getting older that my unspoken expectations lead to resentment. So, being clear has saved me so much headaches. Come on, somebody,
One time for
right?
clear and clarity. I'm here for
Clear
that.
and clarity. Let's
Let's
go.
go.
And
I'm here
then we
for that.
also we also have a question from Auntie Latu.
Okay, go
The
Yes,
ahead.
I
floor
was
is
just
yours.
gonna, I'm really enjoying this session to both of you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, not just that you're telling very informative to everyone, but to me especially. But I
Mhm.
just want to, I'm catching up. Like, so what you mentioned about siblings turning up and unannounced, etc., etc. Could that be an example of healthy boundaries for yourself, for myself, and my siblings? I could see that a lot of them will, kind of roll their eyebrows, but in the long run, it'll be good
Yeah.
for a learning session to all of us.
Oh, for
I'm
sure. Because
just
they'll probably
making a
look like, what do
point.
you mean? Yeah, because what it is like, because what a boundary is says is like, okay, so that door's not open anymore. That gate's closed. So now I need you to ring the doorbell, text me, or call me. Don't just show up
And
anymore.
maybe we could add take your shoes off at the front door
Oh yeah. Oh no, you can't come in my house without that's why there's a
when
shoe
that's
rack by the door.
accepted.
Yeah. But so that's the thing. So even Auntie Latu, so for example, if you want people to take your shoes off, one of the things you can help set a boundary is put a sign on the door.
Yes,
Please take your shoes off. And then
that's right.
if you see them walk in the door, so I've done this before, I said, so I need you to go read the sign outside the door and then
Great.
come back in. They're like, oh, okay. And they do. They do.
They
So
do.
it's just, yeah, so that's the thing. It's what a boundary essentially says is, okay, what I did for you before, that doesn't work for me anymore. Now I have to figure out what works for me now, not what satisfies you.
And also for the safety of your children, like
Absolutely.
you can't just barge in here and we want to know
Oh,
who is coming, right?
absolutely. Yeah, great question. Any other questions?
Yes, I have a comment in the chat. I had a
Sure.
problem advocating for myself, especially when I was younger. Now I understand the importance creating boundaries and taking care of me. So in turn, I can be better for those who depend on me. Yes.
Yes, love that.
Yes.
Yeah. It's important to teach kids boundaries. It just is. Because whatever you teach them, they'll take it. Whatever you do at home is what they'll do in other areas. So it's important to teach boundaries to your kids. And I love that even if we're learning them now as adults, and you have a kid or have a niece, nephew, or a child who you're close with, you boundaries end up becoming a conversation. And I always recommend it. So let's go to one of my favorite slides, boundaries and culture. So culture always plays a significant role in shaping boundaries, and it influences how we communicate, how we assert ourselves, how we respect each other's spaces. And so I wanted to ask you all, how does culture influence your boundaries? You heard mine. It didn't exist when I was growing up. Now it does. If you can put it in the chat, you can share, unmute yourself. Nothing?
The question was, how does culture influence boundaries?
Yeah. If not, we'll just get into the slide. So again, everything, because we always include the cultural piece, because it is a part of our identity, a big part of our identity of who we are. So here's how culture can play a role in boundaries. So of course we have the individualistic versus collectivistic cultures. Where individualistic cultures were focus more on autonomy and independence and personal rights. And they're more about establishing and respecting personal boundaries. And that's often seen as the key to a healthy relationship and personal growth. We're in collectivistic cultures like, Pacific Island AA and HPI cultures, where we have what we call more permeable boundaries, which there's holes in it. And a lot of times we prioritize family, community needs, or over individual desires. And this might also be in particular in collectivistic societies, there's a lot of being uncomfortable with setting firm boundaries, and it often they feel could disrupt relationships. So we're often tasked in collectivistic societies to put other people first, and we tend to lose ourselves in these identities and develop and not really develop our own personal identity. And we're often giving in this sense when we're extremely tired and or stressed, which impacts our overall health. Next one, relational versus hierarchical structures. We got to talk about that. That happens, especially in a lot of Eastern cultures. There's a hierarchy sometimes. So in the relational societies, individuals may be or are made to feel more empowered to establish boundaries regardless of status, age, or family role. We're in the hierarchy, we're in cultures that value hierarchy. there's often a reverence that we give to our elders and adult authority figures, making it harder for us to set boundaries with those in power, who we deem as empowered. Next is communication styles. So again, culture always plays a role. So there are the more direct, direct communication cultures, which oftentimes is more, again, Western cultures, encourage open discussion about boundaries, making it easier to set and clarify personal boundaries. Where in other Eastern cultures, there's more indirect communication, which prioritizes being subtle or polite. And oftentimes people in these who come from these cultures may find it, again, challenging to set firm boundaries, as directness can be seen as impolite or confrontational. Next, gender norms. Oh, wait, influence, sorry. Go back. Well, gender norms and expectations, which went in already. So, because there are cultural norms around gender, which can influence boundaries as well. Because in some cultures, women may be expected to prioritize others' needs, and leading to there's a less defined personal boundary, while men may have more freedom to set boundaries around their time or space. And then now the influence of spiritual or religious beliefs. For some religious or spiritual beliefs shape boundary settings in the ways to feel, where it emphasizes selflessness, which may discourage someone from setting strong personal boundaries in favor of helping others. But in opposition, others may advocate for personal boundaries as a way to honor oneself as a part of spiritual wellness. And then lastly, the excessive guilt. Okay, notice I said excessive. Key word is excessive. There's nothing wrong with having a healthy amount of guilt. It is the excessive guilt that impacts us. So guilt can make setting boundaries feel challenging, because often we feel this pressure to prioritize others' needs over our own. We learn guilt early on from family, culture, religion, and society. So we get these messages about what's right and what's wrong, the importance of pleasing others, and often we want to avoid disappointment. This all shapes how we respond to guilt. This also can influence a sense of a responsibility for someone else being happy, which complicates boundary setting. So you recognize when the big thing, what I always talk about with guilt is, the example that I always give is that we often feel if we don't do what someone asks, we internalize it, because we feel like if we don't do it, we are being disrespectful, dishonorable. We feel like we may be losing their love, and somehow we learn to associate respect, honor, and love with the acceptance of guilt. Again, this is excessive guilt. So oftentimes we avoid repercussions because we don't want the excessive guilt. The thing I want to say about that, again, when we receive that excessive guilt in regards to our elders, again, they're only doing what they learned. So I always talk with my clients about providing themselves self-grace, and also providing grace to whoever their caretaker was. Again, they were doing a lot of survivalistic thinking, and it takes them time to get out of that. So again, this is about excessive guilt. Again, there's nothing wrong with a healthy amount of guilt. This is when it becomes overbearing, to where you're often giving in at the depletion of who you are. So that was a lot. Any questions, any comments?
Yes. So in the chat, communication style is so hard. As an East Asian, it is very, very difficult to learn how to articulate my need clearly and without fear of retaliation or dismissal. I grew up with the expectation of not asserting my needs or preferences. Yep. It is seen as a sign of disobedience or disrespect, regardless if that need or preference actually impacts another person. Yes, and I such similar experience as well. I think we speak about this often, of the be seen and not heard. Where it's like we're there, but like we're not really like encouraged to speak up in certain settings, because then it could, we're just like, be considered disrespectful, like you said. And so like it's just one of those things, and this is why this slide here that Scarlett talks about with boundaries, and how that there's such a unique connection to culture.
Absolutely.
And we bring all of this up so that way we can have an awareness of it. Because a lot of the time we're just going on about it. We don't really get to really think it through, why we feel the way we feel about things, why we're not asserting our boundaries,
Hmm.
where all of this is coming from. But that's why I really appreciate this slide and the focus it does on culture and why all of these things are there and why we're responding the way that we do.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that I always talk about with my clients when they talk about that whole not feeling they don't want to be disobedient, they don't want to be disrespectful. So I end up asking, but what's your definition of that? And then we compare it to actually what the dictionary says. And I said, so you're having a conflicting perception of what disrespect and respect, honor and dishonor and disobedience and obedience is. So then we talk about, is it actually being disrespectful if you say what you need? But I said, the only way can be viewed as disrespectful is how you say it. So if you say it in a way that's harsh and mean and you curse them, yes, that is disrespectful. But if you're talking about what you need in a respectful manner, that's different. This is why we talk about, like what we shared in our previous class board, like you have to identify what's going on with you. Like sit with that. I'm big, and that's all you can tell us all. Like we were big about you got to sit with your stuff and think about
Mhm.
what's going on. Go ahead, Sala.
Another one in the chat. My mother always says when girls of age are old enough, mothers should be allowed to talk story about their traumas. Wow, and what they are dissatisfied about their lives. So this can be regrets, complaints about husbands or my father. And when I tell her it's trauma dumping and inappropriate, she says it's normal for our culture. I
Mhm.
tell her all the time to stop, and that just because it's normalized in our culture doesn't mean it should continue. Come on.
Good job. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because what worked for them doesn't necessarily have to work for you. The one thing we always have been adamant about culture, keep what works. Like truly keep what works for you and then navigate the things that don't work. Because there's always something about because even if we're talking about the story time, like one of the and I've heard that from clients before. I said, well, can we change the subject? Can you tell me a story about a great time that you had with dad or with mom or with auntie or with uncle? And they're like, oh, that's that option part. You get to give yourself permission to give that option, that it doesn't always have to be trauma dumping. Go
Mhm.
ahead, Sala.
Yeah, and I think I always remember one thing you always say in our community conversations when it comes to these intergenerational conversations is, and Scarlett always says this, she says like one thing she explores with her clients is, then you ask them, well, why do you keep doing it? Like, where is this coming from? And, if you're not okay with it, like, why do you want to continue it? Why should you want to continue that? And I think
Mhm.
like being able to understand, because like sometimes for generation to generation, like what you mentioned in the chat, like it just becomes a cultural norm.
Mhm.
It just becomes like such a cultural norm. And it's like you go from generation to generation of moms and women and your community that's just like, oh, that's just how it's always been. It's
Mhm.
been like that since forever. Like, but
Yeah,
why? And
exactly.
what's the purpose in us continuing this? Like, what is it doing for us? And so I always love when you explore that with your clients. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna give a little bit of time over to Auntie Latu. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I was just gonna say, like in the Tongan culture, it's a matriarchal society, and women, like if you have a birthday or a wedding, you always have the fahu system where they sit at the head table and they receive more gifts than the actual couple that are getting married. And I think that's one thing of that society that I like because women are adored in that style. However, there's a lot of hidden other agenda. And I like how you quoted be seen and not heard. And
Mhm.
like I was just discussing with Una, that he's very lucky. A lot of times, like guilt, feeling as an adult and as a grandma, I'm obligated to go to everything that's out there in my community where my adult children or even young adult who are newlywed, they'll say, Mom, but why do you have to go to this and that and this and that? And then that's one thing that our young people who are brought up here in America or in New Zealand, Australia, they have that choice. I have the choice of explaining why, and it's up to them. If they cannot afford, don't have that guilty conscience, and please take care of your bills first. Just let your mom do the going around. That's just something that came to mind. Thank you, ladies. I'm
No, I love
enjoying
that.
this session.
Good. I love that you share that. Yeah, because so I mean, just for transparency, like when it comes to me sharing as far as financially for any Samoan culture event, my family knows yeah, this is the only amount I'm giving. You all figure it out after that. And they're like, wait, what? And when I started doing that, they were just confused. And I said, and of course they would push, can you do this? Can you do? I said, so this is the amount.
Yeah.
So don't, that's all I got. And they're
Yeah.
like, oh, okay. But now that I've been doing it so consistently with them, they're like, okay, we know Scarlett is good for this amount. So we'll figure out the rest.
Yeah.
Yep, that's cool. Let me know how it goes. So, but that's the boundary that you have to set within yourself because
Yes.
it's still me wanting to honor. I love my Samoan culture, absolutely love, but it's still me honoring and also honoring myself in that same vein as well. That you can do both. You can find that balance.
Right.
So, here's why we always think about culture and upbringing. Just like Sala mentioned a little bit earlier, it helps you understand you and your family's positive and negative patterns. Again, this is all about self-awareness. When you come into this therapy space and you sit across either side of the line, if you complain about your family, we will immediately probably say, well, so tell me about you. Tell me how you contribute to this. And they're like, oh, wait, because that's what it is. We have to increase our self-awareness so that you can do better. Next is when you understand the sports roots of who you are, you increase again self-awareness and you're able to show up for yourself in a different way. If we don't learn how to do it differently, you keep showing up in the same way. So again, this is all about increasing your self-awareness. I will have clients come in often say, I don't know why I do that, just like Sala was saying a little bit earlier. So then I say, well, let's talk about it. Let's connect how you grew up and how that's currently playing into your adulthood. And how that upbringing is playing a role in your life right now. So again, I always want to give grace to our elderlies because again, they're always doing from a survivalistic, and that's okay. Now, me saying that does not mean excuse what you experience for them. You can do both. As you can see, you can do both. It does not have to be one or the other. You can still love and honor and still hold them accountable. Two of those things can coexist. So let's talk a little bit about why it's challenging. One, because we're not taught. We're not taught feelings. We're not taught about boundaries. And after a certain grade level, especially here in the United States, you don't learn about it, I think, till like after second grade. Like after second grade, it's basically saying you on your own. And there's such a complexity that happens that we experience as children that know that it's not just taught to us. Because so if our parents don't teach us, our school system don't teach us, we just don't know. We just don't know what personal boundaries are, how we share our feelings. Again, I didn't learn about the fullness of feelings and the fullness of boundaries till I was 29 years old, 28, 29 years old. And I was in grad school to become a therapist. The unfortunate thing is when you're not taught these things, or if you're unaware, that we get to the point that we get comfortable with not knowing. The unfortunate thing, like there are parts of our culture where it teaches us to self-sacrifice all the time. All the time. Next is like Sala mentioned, there's that title of family and friend. So sometimes family members and friends are those who are close to us are our biggest frequent violators of our boundaries because of the title that they have. We often are we are sometimes very passive because we say they're family or friend. So for example, if a family member violates you and you're like, and we end up being passive, be like, oh man, that's just them. That's just mom. That's just dad. That's just, that's just bro. That's just what they do. You know how they are. That's passive. That's being passive toward them. So one of the first things I always challenge my clients is I said, okay, if you actually looked at the quality of the relationship and actually not the title of who they are in your life, like what would you do? Because and we go into this exploration, and they were like, oh man, but I wouldn't let anybody just treat me like that. I said, okay, so we have to look at that, and how do we do that differently? Because oftentimes we give the credit of the title of someone more in our life. We give them more credit to that title rather than looking at the quality of the relationship of who they are to us. And then lastly, we're used to self-sacrificing and being a rescuer or fixer, because this essentially impacts our self-confidence and our self-esteem. Again, I was going to say our caretakers were only doing what they know. And if I'm a solid, firm believer, if they knew how to teach us boundaries, they would. That's not something that they would withhold from us. The biggest thing, like I said, as a former rescuer, I do not rescue. I just say, tell me what you're going to do. Tell me what the solution is. Even my child, I do not rescue my child. I said, tell me what your solution are. If you don't have it, think about it and then come back to me, and then we'll do this together. So it's like, how do we partner together in this? Because my job is not to rescue anybody. My job is to give the information, and what you do with it, that's up to you. That's not on me anymore. So again, I'm always going to advocate to take care of yourself first, because the one thing that we've always said and consistently throughout this inner wellness series is, if you take care of yourself first, you will be better to not only you, but you will be better to whatever system or community or family thing that you are a part of. So it is important to take care of you first. Questions, comments, and Sala, if you want to add anything.
Just a comment that said not just passive, but passive enabling. Oof.
Oh, yeah, you enable, because that's the importance of why we said you have to use your voice. Because what you're essentially doing by not setting that boundary is giving that permission to that person to continue to treat you that way that you don't like. That's what that does. So that's why you have to say, all right, I'm going to close this door. It's not working for me anymore. What boundary do I need to set? What do I need to say to this person so that I don't feel like that anymore? Because again, this is about you. Good comment. Anything else? Good?
Yes, we are good to go.
Awesome. All right, now let's get into these tips. Again, all of the tips that we are giving during the community conversation is just the starting block of how to improve yourself. Again, these are the same tips I teach my clients in my private practice. The reason I say that, because it will be challenging to set boundaries if you do not work on yourself. You have to do the work first. No one else can do the work for you. This is the part where you can't cheat. You got to do it. Okay. You have to do the work for yourself in order for it to be different for you, not anybody else. So, first tip that I have is, how you think about yourself matters. Why? Because it does. However you think about you will impact how you react to others. So and I'm going to give an example. So your thoughts impact how you feel and how you behave. It doesn't matter. Like if you see your behavior happening, it is all traced back to a thought. If you have a certain feeling, it is all traced back with the initial thought that you have. So again, how you think about yourself matters. So I'll give an example, a personal example. So we're going to do negative thought and positive thought. The negative thought that I used to have quite often was, I am not enough. The negative thought I had was, I'm not enough. The feelings associated with that I typically had was, I felt awkward, unworthy, isolated, lonely, miserable, and embarrassed. The behaviors that I exhibited were, I suffered in silence. I didn't reach out for help. I didn't share truthfully because I felt like I always had to have this facade on. And I cried a lot in isolation. So that's the negative thought that I had. And when I started working on myself, this is the positive that I work through. So these are the positive thoughts that I had. So I said, what I started saying to myself, I deserve good things and I am enough. The thought was, what I changed it to is, I deserve good things and I am enough. The feelings that came with that, I still felt awkward because it was awkward. I'm like, oh, I've never felt this way before. Then I felt worthy. I felt warm and beautiful, grateful and thankful. The behaviors I exhibited then that started changing for me was, I started to smile more. I started to take myself on more walks. I learned to celebrate my small victories. And I started sharing truthfully with those who I identified as emotionally safe. So again, how you think about yourself matters. And this, I'm going to keep saying this is why we got to identify our emotionally safe people, because not everybody's emotionally safe. We could put that out there, okay? You have to identify your emotionally safe people. If you go back to our Know Your Feelings class, our community conversation, we do the breakdown of how to do that, how to identify your emotionally safe people. Again, how you think about yourself is important. Sal, you want to add anything, or anybody have any questions, comments? Good? All right. So, healthy boundary tip number 2. Redefine or expand your definition of family and friend to a personal definition. Identify characteristics, traits, behavior that are important to you. Notice I said, redefine, and what we are is we're reducing, not because that's that part where I work with my clients. I said, okay, well, your idea of family or friend is what you learned growing up, and that's your parents' idea. Now, what's your idea? And they're like, wait, what? And they never think about that. Because I'm not saying you can't include what you've taught, but you also get to include what is important to you and what you have learned over your years. So again, it's finding that balance. So here's how you can do that, how you can in regards to that. So I want you to think about the characteristic or traits that are important to you and make you feel safe. And then how does that look like in behavior form? So for example, if love and care is part of your definition, then I want you to think about, what does love and care look like in a behavior form for me? So like you can ask yourself, what behaviors make me feel loved and cared for? So that's how you start expanding that definition or redefining it, however you want to utilize that. That's that part of giving yourself permission. You get to decide what works for you. If you want to keep some of what worked before, please do, but also expand. What does it mean to you? So again, you want to look at if whatever the characteristics are, what does that look like in behavior form to me? Because again, how I feel loved is not going to be the same way someone else feels loved. Because I'm me, ain't no other me, and ain't no other you. You have to know what works for you. Questions, comments on that? Good? All right. Then our last tip. Oh, I love this one. Limit using or and begin practicing using and. Using or is a limiter, and using and increases options. Notice I said limit using or. I didn't say get rid of it. I didn't say stop using it. Limit use it. Only use it when necessary. Again, and is used to remind you of your options, your choices, and assist it. And what it does is helps you give yourself permission. It is important in this sense, especially when we're talking about boundaries, is to be kind to yourself. How you treat yourself highly indicates how you will allow others to treat you. So if you don't honor you, we can't expect others to honor us either. If you don't set a boundary of what something hurts you and you don't say it, you can't expect somebody to know that either. So again, how you treat you impacts how you interact with others. So again, it's again that time and practice. So here's the power of and at work. I'm giving a couple of examples. So right now, first one is, I don't like myself right now. And I'm going to practice treating myself nicely. I don't like myself right now. And I'm going to practice to treating myself nicely. And here's the reason why I love the power of and, because often what I work with clients is like, we have negative thoughts. They're not going anywhere. Let me just keep it real. They're just not. What I say is, let's not stay in that. Let's do the and part. And they're like, oh yeah, I forgot. Because I call it completing the thought. So we go to that other part. All right, so whatever they say, that I'm going to practice to treat myself nicely. So then I say to them, all right, so what are you going to do for yourself nicely? That's that and part. And then the next one is, I love my family, and there are times when they have hurt me, and I can set healthy boundaries with them. Yes, still love them, and yes, they've hurt me, and yes, I can still set boundaries with them. Whether if I just use or, it's just I have to pick one or the other. It's either them or me, which is that limiter, which is why I say use and, because and reminds you of all, it's inclusive, and it reminds you of all your options and your choices. Questions, comments. That's our last slide.
We have a comment in the chat says, the or and is so funny here because I'm a librarian and we talk about these two terms in the opposite way. Like, for example, searching with or expands the options. Searching with and narrows the options. This would be helpful for me to remember this particular tip. Funny connection.
I love that. Yeah.
I
So
didn't know that.
yeah. So in the sense of people doing, use
Right.
or.
Of verbally communicating this.
Verbal communication, use and or, and like I said, I'm not saying we get rid of or. I'm not saying that. I'm saying limit it to where, because oftentimes what I notice when clients would use or, they excluded themselves immediately. I have to do this or else, or my blah 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 to this and that, but none of it includes them. Okay, so you still have to do this, and what's the boundary you can still set with that? You're like, oh, that's a good point. That's all that is. That's all that is. All this is you including you in all of this. Because again, if you are not doing well for you in your own space and in your own internal, it projects out very negatively in whoever you interact with. And I say that as Sal and I have a combined experience of over 20 years, and we have seen a lot in our offices. So this is why we teach what we teach. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
So one final comment from the chat. I love the analogy and it's super practical with people work.
Yeah. Yeah, listen, you've got to teach people how to treat you. At the end of the day, you have to teach people how to treat you, because what works for you essentially doesn't work for anybody else. And that's okay. Because remember, whatever boundary you set, however someone reacts to that, that's information for you. And you get to decide what you want to do. And again, boundaries take practice. It is time and practice for sure. So you have a couple minutes. I just want to give space if anybody else want to share anything. Anybody have any questions? Again, please take advantage. You have 2 licensed therapists here who do what we do. So please take advantage of that. And if not, that's okay too. And if you go home today and anybody who's watching on the internet streets, if you go home today and you say, oh man, I have a question I wish I could have asked Scarlett and Sala, please still send it in. We will answer it. We get them. So we don't mind, because this is what we want to do. We want to be a conduit of change for our community so that our community can continue to thrive and not stay stagnant in regards to these areas, especially around mental health. So any last questions, any comments, and Sala, if you wanted to add anything?
No, just that. I think want to give some time to Leslie to be able to share some of our amazing resources over there in our Green River Community College campus regarding mental health, or just this program.
Yes, on campus we have our counseling services, which is meant for like short-term support for students. It is free for them. They host drop-in hours and also can have like appointment times as well. There's also the Center for Transformational Wellness, where they have social work interns for more like longer term like support as well.
Awesome sauce. So yeah, so again, we thank you all for coming to today's community conversation. It is such an honor, and it's such a joy in what we do. As you can tell, we are highly passionate about what we do, and we will continue doing this until everybody says, all right, we're tired of seeing y'all. So we absolutely love what we do. And so again, please, so my challenge to you all is we have one more, and I believe it's the first week of December. I know that. Is to tell someone and bring someone. And so again, and if you can catch the replay of this on Voice of the South Pacific Facebook page, and they keep it all up there. And please share the replay with somebody. And if you have questions, rewatch it. And again, if you have questions, comments, and would like to share, please email us. In the event summary is Sala and I's contact information. There's also 2 resource sheets in there. It's 50 ways to take a break and our feelings wheel, because we will always give out our feelings wheel because it's needed. And if you don't like the feelings wheel that is in there, please share. Please look up Google one, just Google feelings wheel, and take a screenshot of what works for you until you can have it in your phone. Go ahead, Sala.
One final comment. Thank you so much. This was the session I was most looking forward to. We love that in the series, and I'm glad that I could come and engage. Yes.
Thank you all
Thank you for coming and for making.
awesome. Thank you. So, all right. So we are going to close on out, unless Leslie, you want to officially close this out. And thank you all for the students at the GRC Event Center. Again, if please reach out to Leslie. She has the event summary sheet if you watch. And again, if you have questions for us, please come out and reach out to us. So Leslie, I will officially turn it over to you to close this out. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you everyone for tuning in for today's session again. Special thanks to our experts, Sala and Scarlett, for their time and sharing more about boundaries. This is episode 7 of our 8-part series, so join us Thursday, December 5th from 12 to 1:30 p.m. for the last session of the quarter. For those of you tuning in at the GRC Student Union, we have post-event surveys that you can share with us your thoughts and what you would like to hear us cover in the future. Thank you again to our sponsors and collaborations on this project, and we'll catch you next time on Inner Wellness. Take care.
I can feel